Kairo Sinclair's hand froze on the polished brass handle of his office door. Laughter. Children's laughter. Inside his office. His jaw locked tight, and that old familiar ache spread across his chest like ice cracking over a frozen lake. For 15 years, he'd built walls high enough to keep that sound out of his life, thick enough that nothing soft, nothing innocent, nothing remotely childlike could penetrate the empire he'd constructed from grief and rage. But there it was, giggling, high-pitched and carefree. He pushed the door open. Two little girls, identical, maybe 3 years old, sat cross-legged on his imported Persian rug, surrounded by what used to be his quarterly financial reports. Markers. Everywhere. Red and blue and purple streaks decorated the mahogany surface of his desk like a kindergarten art project gone rogue. The smell of washable markers mixed with something sweet, maybe strawberry shampoo. Their brown eyes, wide and innocent, looked up at him without fear. Sticky fingerprints covered his desk, his chair, his laptop. "We drawed you a picture, mister." The bolder one held up a page covered in scribbles. "You looked sad." Kairo stood frozen. Rage should have come, the kind of cold fury that made grown executives stammer and board members sweat, the kind that got people fired on the spot. But it didn't come. Instead, something cracked deep inside him, something that hadn't moved in 15 years, not since Elena's hand went limp in his, her belly swollen with their son as machines beeped their final warnings. The door burst open behind him. A woman rushed in, her face drained of all color. Terror filled her dark eyes as she saw the scene, her children in the lion's den, and the lion standing perfectly still. "Mr. Sinclair, Her voice broke. "I can explain." But Kairo couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stare at these two tiny humans who'd somehow breached every defense he'd spent years perfecting. And in that single moment, 3 lives collided in a way that would either destroy them all or save them. If you're watching from your couch at 2 a.m. or sneaking this at work, drop a like and hit subscribe, because what happens next will shatter everything you think you know about this story.
He just made their relationship official.
Chapter 2. 6 weeks earlier, Ivy Brooks had walked into Sinclair Biotech with a carefully constructed lie already sitting heavy on her tongue. At 28, she looked older. Exhaustion had carved shadows under her eyes that no concealer could fully hide. Her interview suit was 3 years old, pressed within an inch of its life because she couldn't afford a new one. Not when Zoe's medication cost $1,800 a month. Not when Amara's physical therapy sessions ran $200 each. Not when she was drowning. Kairo Sinclair barely looked at her during the interview. He sat behind that massive desk, the same one that would later be covered in marker stains, and spoke in clipped, precise sentences. His reputation preceded him. Brilliant, ruthless, and completely intolerant of anything that disrupted his perfectly ordered world. "The position requires complete dedication," he'd said, his dark eyes finally meeting hers. "I work late, I work weekends, I have zero tolerance for personal complications interfering with professional responsibilities." He paused, then added almost casually, "And I maintain a strict policy. No children in this building, ever. If you have childcare issues, handle them off-site." Ivy's throat grew dry, but she forced a smile. "That won't be a problem, Mr. Sinclair." The lie tasted like ash. She needed this job, desperately. The salary alone would cover both girls' treatments with enough left over for actual groceries instead of ramen and hope. 3 years ago, she'd been a pediatric nurse with a husband and a future. Then came the diagnosis. The doctor's words still echoed in her nightmares. Severe combined immunodeficiency, extremely rare. Without treatment, the prognosis is... He hadn't needed to finish. Tristan stayed for 6 months. 6 months of watching their baby girls struggle to breathe, of hospital visits and insurance denials and medical bills that multiplied like cancer cells. Then, one morning, Ivy woke to find a note on the kitchen counter and their bank account emptied. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." That was it. No forwarding address, no child support, Just Ivy, 2 dying babies, and a mountain of debt that grew taller every single day. She'd worked 3 jobs since then: night shift at a diner, weekend data entry, freelance medical transcription during the girls' nap times. She slept 4 hours a night if she was lucky. Zoe was the bold one, always laughing, always climbing, always testing boundaries with a fearlessness that terrified Ivy. Amara was quieter, gentler, the twin who colored inside the lines and whispered her words like secrets. But when they laughed together, synchronized and pure, Ivy remembered why she kept fighting, because losing them wasn't an option. Kairo's story, she learned from office gossip, was equally broken. 15 years ago, his fiancée Elena had been 8 months pregnant when his younger brother Silas crashed their car. Silas walked away with bruises. Elena and the baby didn't walk away at all. Kairo cut his brother out of his life that night, cut out everything that reminded him of what he'd lost. He'd built Sinclair Biotech from nothing, poured his grief into creating treatments for diseases that stole futures. But he refused to be around children, refused to let himself feel anything soft or hopeful or remotely paternal. People whispered that he'd fired an employee once for bringing her son to the office during a snow day. And Ivy had just accepted a job as his executive assistant, knowing her twin daughters were her entire world. She'd walked out of Sinclair Biotech that day, sat in her beat-up Honda, and pulled up the photo on her phone. Zoe and Amara, gap-toothed and grinning, their matching braids slightly crooked because Ivy had rushed through them that morning. "Just a little longer, babies. Mommy's going to save you." Even if it meant lying to the one man who might actually have the resources to help them. Even if it meant hiding the most important parts of herself. Even if it meant risking everything.
Chapter 3.
6 weeks into the job, Ivy's phone buzzed during the worst possible moment. She was in Kairo's office, organizing files for the quarterly board presentation, the most critical meeting of the year, investors flying in from 3 continents, millions of dollars hanging in the balance, and her phone screen lit up with words that made her blood run cold. "Mrs. Chen fell. Broken hip. Ambulance here. So sorry." Her babysitter, the only person she trusted with Zoe and Amara, gone. Ivy's mind raced through options like shuffling cards. Her neighbor worked days, the backup sitter was out of town, the daycare had a 3-month waiting list. She had exactly 90 minutes before the board meeting started, and Kairo needed her to run the presentation tech, manage documents, coordinate with catering. She couldn't miss this. She'd be fired. But she couldn't leave 2 3-year-olds alone. 20 minutes later, Ivy was sneaking through Sinclair Biotech's side entrance with a twin holding each hand. "This is Mommy's work," she whispered, heart hammering. "We're going to play the quiet game, okay?" She'd found an unused storage room on the 4th floor, far from the executive level, far from Kairo's eyes. She set up tablets loaded with cartoons, scattered snacks and juice boxes, laid out coloring books. "You have to stay here," Ivy said, kneeling to their eye level. "Don't open the door for anyone but Mommy, promise?" "Promise," Zoe said solemnly. Amara just nodded, already focused on her tablet. Ivy locked the door from outside, her stomach twisted in knots. Just a few hours. They'd be safe. They had to be. The board meeting started at 10 sharp. Ivy stood at the back of the conference room, managing slides on her laptop, while Kairo presented to 15 stone-faced executives. Her phone was on silent, but she felt every passing minute like a ticking bomb. At 10:47, she slipped out to check on the girls. They were fine, coloring, snacking, whispering to each other. At 11:30, she checked again. Still fine. At 12:15, the meeting hit a critical point, questions flying, Kairo needing documents she had to retrieve from his office. She couldn't leave. And in the storage room on the 4th floor, Amara tugged her sister's sleeve. "Zoe, I need the bathroom." To a 3-year-old, the building was a maze of shiny floors and tall doors. They wandered down one hallway, then another. Everything looked the same. Amara started crying softly. "Don't cry," Zoe said, holding her sister's hand. "It's an adventure. Look, pretty lights." The executive floor gleamed like something from a fairy tale, floor-to-ceiling windows, polished marble. And at the end of the hall, one door stood slightly open. The cleaning crew had left Kairo's office unlocked. The girls stepped inside, eyes wide. The desk was huge and shiny, papers were stacked in perfect piles, and in the top drawer, Zoe was an expert climber, were colorful markers. "Let's make him a picture," Zoe announced. "He looks sad." She'd seen Kairo that morning in the elevator. He never smiled. By the time Kairo returned from the conference room, his quarterly reports were abstract art, and two little girls were giggling over their masterpiece. The rest happened fast. His shock, Zoe's innocent words, Ivy bursting through the door, her face crumbling as she realized her career was over. "Mr. Sinclair, I can explain." Kairo's voice was ice. "You brought children into my building." "Please, I had no choice. My babysitter." "You lied to me." "I know. I'm sorry. Just let me get them out." "You're fired. Get them out of my—" Amara swayed where she stood. Her eyes rolled back. Her small body crumpled. Ivy's scream cut through everything. She dropped to her knees, gathering Amara into her arms. "Baby, no, no." And Kairo Sinclair, the man who'd spent 15 years avoiding anything that resembled parenthood, moved without thinking. "Call 911, he barked, already pulling out his phone. But he didn't wait for ambulances. He scooped Amara from Ivy's arms with a surprising gentleness and headed for the door. "My car, now. I'm calling my medical team to meet us at the hospital." Ivy grabbed Zoe and ran after him. In the elevator, Kairo held the unconscious child against his chest. Amara looked so tiny in his arms, so fragile. Her braids were coming loose, and without thinking, he adjusted her head so it rested more comfortably against his shoulder. Something in his chest, something he thought had died 15 years ago, cracked wide open. "She's going to be okay," he said, and he wasn't sure if he was telling Ivy or himself. "She's going to be okay." Sirens wailed in the distance as they burst through the lobby doors. Chapter 4. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Ivy sat with her face in her hands, Zoe curled in her lap, while doctors worked on Amara behind closed doors. She'd stopped crying 20 minutes ago. Now, she just felt numb. Kairo sat beside her. He hadn't left. "Tell me," he said quietly. So she did. Everything spilled out in broken sentences. The diagnosis 3 years ago, the words severe combined immunodeficiency, the way the doctor had looked at her twin baby girls like they were already ghosts. The experimental treatments that insurance refused to cover. Tristan emptying their accounts and disappearing. The medical debt that had swallowed her whole. "I work 3 jobs," Ivy whispered, "and it's still not enough. Every month I have to choose, pay for Zoe's medication or Amara's therapy, keep the electricity on or buy the supplements they need. I'm drowning, Mr. Sinclair, and I lied to you because this job was the only thing that could save them." Kairo listened without interrupting. Something shifted behind his eyes, something that looked almost like understanding. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was cautiously optimistic. Amara was stable, but she needed to restart the treatment protocol immediately. He listed costs that made Ivy want to vomit. "How much time does she have?" Kairo asked. "Without treatment, maybe 6 months. With treatment," the doctor hesitated, "there's an experimental program that might help, but it's expensive." "How expensive?" The number made Ivy flinch. Kairo didn't blink. "I'll cover it." Ivy's head snapped up. "What?" He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Keep your job. I'll fund their treatment through Sinclair Biotech's experimental program. One condition, you bring them to work every day, for research monitoring." "Why would you do this?" Ivy's voice cracked. Suspicion and desperate hope warred in her chest. Kairo's jaw tightened. I have my reasons. What he didn't say, because their laughter cracked something inside me that's been frozen for 15 years, because when I held Amara, I felt like a human being again instead of a ghost. The first week of the new arrangement was chaos. Kairo's pristine corner office transformed overnight. A section was cleared for a small table, chairs, toy bins, coloring books. The girls arrived every morning with Ivy, wide-eyed and uncertain. Kairo had no idea how to talk to children. They terrified him more than hostile board members. "What do they eat?" Kairo asked that first morning. "Food, like humans." He scowled, and Zoe giggled. "You look like a grumpy bear." The nickname stuck. Things shifted during a conference call 2 weeks in. Kairo was negotiating with Tokyo investors when Amara, quiet, gentle Amara, climbed into his lap and curled up like a kitten. He froze mid-sentence. The investors waited. Slowly, carefully, Kairo adjusted his arms so she was comfortable and continued the call one-handed. Amara's breathing evened out as she fell asleep against his chest. From the doorway, Ivy watched with something warm and dangerous blooming in her chest. Late one night, after the twins had fallen asleep on the office couch, Ivy finally asked, "The accident, will you tell me what happened?" Kairo was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, "Her name was Elena. We were getting married in 3 months. She was 8 months pregnant with our son." His voice was flat, emotionless, but his hands gripped his desk. The silence stretched. "I was going to be a father, and then I wasn't, and I decided I never would be." Ivy reached across the desk. Her hand stopped just short of his. "I'm sorry." "Your husband. Tell me about him." So she did. Tristan's fear, his weakness, the note that had destroyed her. Their hands were almost touching. Neither moved to close the gap, but neither pulled away. "We're both good at being alone," Ivy said softly. "Yeah, we are." Weeks passed. Ivy started noticing things. How Kairo's expression softened when Zoe showed him her drawings. How he'd started keeping their favorite snacks in his desk. How he'd rearranged his schedule to read them stories during lunch. The twins were getting stronger, healthier. The treatment was working. And Ivy was falling for a man who built walls around his heart, but was letting 2 little girls climb right over them. One rainy evening, Kairo insisted on driving them home. He walked them to the apartment door, holding an umbrella over all 3 of them. Ivy looked up at him. He looked down at her. The air between them crackled. Kairo leaned in. "Are you going to be our daddy?" Zoe asked suddenly, appearing between them. They jumped apart like teenagers caught by parents. The moment shattered, but something had shifted. And inside the building, Vivian Cross watched from her car, phone in hand, already making notes.
Chapter 5. 4 months after 2 little girls had destroyed his quarterly reports, Kairo Sinclair stood across a ballroom and realized he was in love. The company gala was Sinclair Biotech's biggest event of the year. Investors in tuxedos, champagne towers, string quartets playing music that cost more per hour than most people's rent. Ivy had insisted she didn't need to attend, but Kairo had been equally insistent. "You're my executive assistant," he'd said, "professional obligation." They both knew that was a lie. Now she stood near the dessert table in a deep blue dress she'd probably bought second-hand, laughing at something a researcher's wife had said, and Kairo couldn't breathe. When had this happened? When had she stopped being just the woman who worked for him and become the person he thought about first thing in the morning and last thing at night? He found her in the garden an hour later, escaping the crowd. "I need to tell you something," Kairo said. Ivy turned, moonlight catching in her hair. "I was dead inside for 15 years. The words came out rough, unpracticed. I walked through life like a ghost, built an empire because I didn't know what else to do with the anger. And then 2 3-year-olds covered my desk in marker and everything changed. Kairo? Zoe and Amara brought me back to life, he continued. But you, Ivy, you taught me it was okay to be alive again. You taught me I could have this, that I deserved this. He stepped closer. I'm in love with you. I'm in love with your daughters. I want to be their father. I want us to be a family. Not pretend, not convenient, real. Ivy's eyes filled with tears. I'm terrified. What if this breaks? What if you wake up one day and realize... He kissed her. 15 years of loneliness dissolved in that kiss. Her hands fisted in his jacket, his fingers tangled in her hair. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I'm not going anywhere, Kairo said against her lips. 2 weeks later, he didn't just propose to Ivy. He got down on one knee in his office with both twins present, pulled out a ring, and said the words that mattered most. Zoe, Amara, would you like me to be your daddy, for real and forever? Zoe launched herself at him with a shriek. Yes! Amara climbed into his lap and wrapped her small arms around his neck. We love you, Mr. Grumpy Bear. Ivy was crying so hard she could barely say yes to his actual proposal. The wedding planning started immediately. Small ceremony, just close friends. The twins would be flower girls. Kairo was already talking to lawyers about adoption papers. Life felt perfect. He taught Zoe to ride a bike in the park, running beside her with his hand on the seat until she found her balance. Amara's artwork covered every available surface in his office. He'd had some of it professionally framed. The girls called him Daddy now, unselfconsciously, like he'd always been theirs. Then came the knock on Ivy's apartment door. She opened it expecting a delivery. Instead, she found Tristan. He looked different, cleaned up, sober. His eyes were clearer than she'd seen them in years. Ivy, he said, I know I have no right to be here, but I've changed. I went to rehab, got myself together, and I want my daughters back. The shock hit her like cold water, then rage, white-hot and blinding. You left us, her voice shook. You abandoned us when they were dying. You have no right. I have parental rights. His tone shifted, became harder. I've talked to a lawyer. I've been in treatment. I'm stable now, and I can file for custody. I will file for custody. Ivy's hands trembled. You can't. You won't. I saw the engagement announcement. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Sinclair Biotech, CEO. Big company. Going public soon, right? That's a lot of money. Understanding dawned cold and sick. Here's the deal, Ivy. $5 million and I sign away my rights. You get your happy ending with your billionaire and the girls get their new daddy. He paused. Or I file for full custody and take this to the media. Single father trying to reunite with daughters stolen by rich CEO. Think about the headlines. Get out. Think about it, Tristan said, already backing away. Your billionaire can afford it. Or I drag you through courts and take Zoe and Amara anyway. You've got 1 week. He left. Ivy stood in her doorway, shaking, until Zoe called from the living room asking for juice. That night, after the girls were asleep, she told Kairo everything. His reaction was immediate. I'll pay. I'll wire the money tomorrow. No. Ivy, I won't let him profit from abandoning them. Her voice rose. He left us to die. He doesn't get to come back and get rich from it. I don't care about the money. I care about keeping our family together. It's not about the money. It's about what's right. Their first real fight. Kairo's protective fury against Ivy's wounded pride. They went to bed angry, the space between them feeling miles wide. Neither noticed the car parked across the street. Inside, Vivian Cross lowered her phone and smiled. She'd been documenting everything for weeks: the relationship, the company resources funneled into the twins' treatment, the conflict of interest so obvious it was practically gift-wrapped. She dialed a number. "It's done," she said when someone answered. "I have everything we need to remove Sinclair. Yes, the children, and the relationship with his assistant. We move at the next board meeting." She hung up and started the car. Kairo Sinclair was about to lose everything, and Vivian would finally get what she had wanted all along.
Chapter 6. The emergency board meeting was called for Thursday at 9 a.m. Kairo knew something was wrong the moment he walked into the conference room. Vivian sat at the head of the table, his seat, with a folder in front of her and a smile that made his skin crawl. "Thank you for joining us, Kairo," she said sweetly. "Please, sit." He remained standing. "What's this about?" Vivian opened the folder. "It's come to our attention that you've been using company resources for personal matters, specifically funding experimental treatments for your assistant's children. Children who, I might add, you've allowed to disrupt this workplace for months." The other board members shifted uncomfortably. "The treatments are part of our research program," Kairo said evenly. "A research program you expanded specifically to accommodate Miss Brooks and her daughters, a subordinate employee with whom you're having a romantic relationship. The conflict of interest alone is grounds for removal." She slid papers across the table. Financial records, photos of Kairo with the twins, text messages between him and Ivy. "Our company is about to go public. Investors are already nervous about leadership stability. What do you think happens when this gets out, when they learn our CEO is playing house with his secretary's kids while hemorrhaging resources?" "Those treatments are saving lives," Kairo said. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Not just Zoe and Amara. 12 other children are in that program." "A program that's costing us millions with no return on investment." Vivian leaned back. "So here's your choice, Kairo. Step down voluntarily and we'll handle this quietly. Or we vote no confidence and expose everything publicly. Your reputation, the company's reputation, Miss Brooks's reputation, all destroyed." The room was silent. Kairo looked at each board member. Some wouldn't meet his eyes. "I choose them," he said finally. "I choose my family." He signed the resignation papers that afternoon. But stepping down wasn't enough for Vivian. 2 days later, citing budget concerns and the need to stabilize before the IPO, she shut down the experimental treatment program entirely. 12 families got letters, including Ivy's. Within a week, Zoe and Amara started declining. The fevers came back first, then the weakness. Amara stopped eating. Zoe's laughter faded. Hospital visits became daily occurrences, then twice daily. The doctors' faces grew more concerned. And Tristan sold his story to every tabloid that would listen. "Billionaire CEO stole my family," ran in 3 major papers. The photos were damning. Kairo with the twins, Ivy on his arm at the gala. The narrative painted him as a predator who targeted a vulnerable single mother. Investors panicked, stock prices plummeted, partners pulled funding. Sinclair Biotech was crashing, and Kairo's name was mud. Ivy found him in his home office. He'd stopped going to the company building, staring at his laptop screen. "You need to leave us," she said. He looked up sharply. "This is destroying you," Ivy continued, her voice cracked. "Your company, your reputation, everything you built, because of us. You need to save yourself." "No." "Ivy?" "I'm not going anywhere." He stood, crossed to her. "I lost one family. I won't lose another. I don't care about the company. I don't care about my reputation. I care about you and those girls. But, Kairo, you are everything, Ivy. Everything. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. 3 days later, Amara crashed. Her fever spiked to 104. She couldn't breathe properly. The ambulance came screaming, and Ivy rode with her, while Kairo followed with a terrified Zoe. In the hospital waiting room, Zoe cried in Kairo's lap. Her sister was dying, and she didn't understand why. "It's okay, sweetheart," Kairo whispered, but his own voice shook. "Amara's going to be okay." "Please," he thought, "please, God, anyone listening, I'll do anything. Just let her live." The doctors stabilized Amara, but barely. Without the treatment, she had maybe weeks. That night, Kairo and Ivy sat in the hallway outside Amara's room. "We're losing," Ivy said numbly, "on every front. Tristan's winning, Vivian's winning, the girls are dying, and there's nothing we can do." Kairo had no answer. For the first time in his life, he felt completely powerless. This was his fault, his curse. Everyone he loved suffered because of him. Elena and their son, now Ivy and her daughters. Maybe he was never meant to have a family. Maybe. "Kairo." He looked up. A man stood at the end of the hallway, older, weathered, carrying a leather folder of papers. A man Kairo hadn't seen in 15 years. Silas, Kairo's brother. Rage ignited instantly. Kairo stood, his whole body tensing. "Get out! You have no right to be here." Silas didn't move. His eyes, the same dark brown as Kairo's, were filled with pain. "I have a treatment," Silas said quietly. "I can save them. Please, brother, let me save them."
Chapter 7. Kairo stared at his brother across the hospital hallway, 15 years of rage and grief rising like a tsunami. "You killed them," Kairo said, his voice shaking. "You killed Elena. You killed my son. And now you think you can just walk back into my life?" Silas flinched but held his ground. "I know what I did. I've lived with it every single day for 15 years. "You lived?" Kairo's laugh was bitter. "They didn't get to live, Silas. My son didn't get to take his first breath because you were drunk and stupid, and I became a biochemist because of them." The words stopped Kairo. Silas stepped closer, his hands trembling around the folder. "After the accident, I couldn't just go on like nothing happened. So I went back to school, studied molecular biology, genetics. I've spent 15 years developing treatments for genetic conditions. For the child I killed, yours." He opened the folder, pulled out research papers covered in complex formulas and data. "This is a modified gene therapy. It targets the specific immune deficiency Zoe and Amara have. I've been following your company's research, Kairo. I know what they need, and I think I can save them." Ivy had been silent, but now she stood. "You think?" "The therapy is experimental, risky, but based on my trials, there's an 87% success rate." Silas looked at Kairo. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to let me try to do something right for once in my miserable life." Kairo's hands were fists at his sides. Every instinct screamed to throw Silas out, to never let him near anything Kairo loved ever again. But then Ivy's hand touched his arm. "Kairo," she said gently, "let him try, for the girls." The war inside him was brutal. Rage against desperation, hate against hope. He thought of Elena, of the son he'd never met. He thought of Amara in that hospital bed, her small chest struggling for each breath. He thought of losing another child. "I hated you," Kairo said finally, and tears spilled down his face. I still hate what you did, but they need you. So if you can save them, please save them." Silas's own tears fell. "I can't bring back Elena and your son, but I can do this. I swear to you, I can do this." The reconciliation wasn't complete. Maybe it never would be, but it was a beginning. The treatment started the next morning. Silas worked with the hospital's medical team, carefully administering the gene therapy. It was risky. Ivy signed consent forms with shaking hands while Kairo held her. But within 48 hours, changes appeared. Amara's fever broke. Color returned to her cheeks. She sat up and asked for juice. Zoe, who'd been declining too, started laughing again. By the end of the week, both girls were running around the hospital room, and the doctors were calling it miraculous. Ivy watched Kairo and Silas work side by side, discussing treatment protocols and monitoring the twins' progress. Years of pain were starting to heal in small, careful increments. But there was still work to do. Late one night, while the twins slept peacefully, Kairo and Ivy sat with laptops open, reviewing everything that had happened. "Something doesn't add up," Kairo said, scrolling through financial records. "Vivian shut down the program claiming budget issues, but look at these transactions." Ivy leaned over. "What am I looking at?" "Money moving out of Sinclair Biotech right before the shutdown. Small amounts, easy to miss, but they add up." Kairo made a call to Marcus, his former CFO, and one of the few board members who'd opposed Vivian. Within days, they had a trail. The money led to GenCorp, Sinclair Biotech's biggest competitor. "She was paid," Marcus confirmed over the phone. "Vivian took bribes to sabotage the company. They wanted to drive down stock prices, force a hostile takeover, and steal your research, especially the experimental treatments." Kairo's smile was cold. "Get me everything. Every email, every transaction, every witness." Meanwhile, Ivy had hired a private investigator to look into Tristan. What they found made her stomach turn. Tristan had a new girlfriend. She was 6 months pregnant, and according to the investigator's report, she was filing a police report for financial abuse. The pattern was clear. Tristan targeted vulnerable women, got them pregnant, drained their resources, and disappeared. Ivy called Jessica. She was terrified but willing to talk. "He took everything," Jessica said, crying over the phone. "My savings, my credit cards. Then he told me he was going to get money from his ex-wife and disappeared. I didn't know he had other children until I saw the news." "Would you be willing to testify in court?" "Yes. God, yes. He can't keep doing this." The pieces fell into place. 1 week after Silas had arrived, Kairo, Ivy, and Silas sat around the dining table in Kairo's penthouse. Legal documents and evidence covered every surface. In the next room, Zoe and Amara slept peacefully, their breathing steady and strong. Healthy. "We have everything," Kairo said, reviewing the files. "Vivian's fraud, GenCorp's conspiracy, Tristan's pattern of abuse. We hit them both at once. Shareholders meeting for Vivian, family court for Tristan." Silas looked at his brother. "Are you sure you want me there, at the shareholders meeting?" Kairo met his eyes. The answer wasn't easy, but it was honest. "You saved my daughters. That doesn't erase what happened, but it means something." He paused. "I want you there, as family." Silas nodded, unable to speak. Ivy reached across the table and took both brothers' hands. "We fight back," Kairo said, "together."
Chapter 8. The emergency shareholders meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. Vivian arrived early, confident and smiling. She'd already prepared her speech about transitioning leadership, about bringing in new management from GenCorp. The takeover was nearly complete. Then, Kairo Sinclair walked through the doors. With him were Ivy, Silas, Marcus, the CFO, and 3 lawyers carrying boxes of evidence. Vivian's smile faltered. "Kairo,
I'm surprised to see you. You resigned, remember? I'm still a majority shareholder, Kairo said calmly, which means I can call for a vote, which I'm doing right now. He nodded to Marcus, who began distributing folders to every person in the room. What you're looking at, Kairo said, is evidence of corporate fraud, espionage, and breach of fiduciary duty. Vivian Cross has been taking payments from GenCorp Pharmaceuticals for the past 8 months. Her goal was to sabotage Sinclair Biotech, drive down stock prices, and enable a hostile takeover. Murmurs filled the room. Vivian stood abruptly. "This is absurd. You're desperate, Kairo. You used company resources for your personal—" "I funded medical research that saved lives," Kairo interrupted, his voice cutting through hers like steel. "Research that's now successfully treating 12 children who would have died otherwise. You shut down that program not because of budget concerns, but because GenCorp paid you to." The lawyers presented bank statements, emails, recorded phone calls. The evidence was damning. Vivian's composure cracked. "You can't prove—" "We have witnesses from GenCorp willing to testify in exchange for immunity," Marcus said. "We have your financial records. We have everything." The room erupted in shocked conversation. "I call for an immediate vote," Kairo said, "to remove Vivian Cross from the board and reinstate me as CEO." The vote was unanimous. Vivian was escorted out by security while lawyers confirmed that criminal charges would be filed. Her career was over. GenCorp executives were already facing investigation. Kairo stood before the shareholders, but he wasn't the same man who'd resigned weeks ago. "I'm accepting the CEO position again, but with changes. My brother, Dr. Silas Sinclair, will be joining as Chief Scientific Officer. The experimental treatment program will reopen immediately, expanded and properly funded." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. 15 years ago, my fiancé and our son died. I've spent every year since building this company, but I forgot why it mattered. 2 little girls and their mother reminded me. This company will now focus on what it should have all along, saving children's lives. We're establishing the Elena Sinclair Memorial Research Fund in my fiancé's name. The standing ovation was immediate. In the back row, Ivy couldn't stop crying. Across town, another battle was reaching its conclusion. Family court was less dramatic but equally decisive. Tristan sat with his lawyer, still confident. He'd cleaned up well, looked respectable. He thought he'd win. Then Jessica took the stand. She was 6 months pregnant, visibly shaking, but her testimony was clear. Tristan had targeted her online, moved in within weeks, convinced her to add him to her bank accounts. Then he drained everything and vanished. "He told me he was going to get money from his rich ex-wife and her new billionaire boyfriend," Jessica said. "I didn't know he'd abandoned other children until I saw the news." The judge's expression hardened. Tristan's lawyer tried to object, but the pattern was established. The investigator had found 2 other women with similar stories, all pregnant or with young children, all financially devastated. Ivy's testimony came next. 3 years of struggle, medical bills Tristan had ignored, the note he'd left. Then Kairo took the stand. He spoke about Zoe and Amara's medical needs, the treatments, his commitment to adopting them. His love for them was evident in every word. The judge didn't deliberate long. "Mr. Harrison, your parental rights are hereby terminated. You are ordered to pay back child support and are forbidden from contacting Miss Brooks or the children. A restraining order will be issued immediately." Tristan's face went white. His lawyer gathered papers in defeat. Outside the courthouse, Ivy collapsed into Kairo's arms. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." "Yeah, it's over," Kairo said, holding her tight. The media narrative shifted overnight. Stories of redemption, of a CEO who'd chosen love over profit. Medical journals praised Silas's breakthrough treatment. Sinclair Biotech stock didn't just recover, it soared. 2 weeks later, the doctor confirmed what they already knew. Zoe and Amara were completely healthy. In Kairo's office, their office now, the twins played with Uncle Silas while Ivy and Kairo watched from the doorway. "We did it," Ivy said softly. "We actually did it." Kairo pulled her close. "Marry me. Let me be their father. Let's be a family." Ivy smiled through happy tears. "Yes, we already are."
Chapter 9. 1 year later, Kairo Sinclair stood in a garden filled with white roses and waited for his life to begin again. The wedding was small, just close friends and family. Silas stood beside him as best man, a symbol of forgiveness that had taken 15 years to reach. His brother's hand squeezed his shoulder, and Kairo squeezed back. Then the music started. Zoe and Amara came first, flower girls in matching purple dresses, healthy and radiant and giggling as they scattered petals. Their braids were perfect, their smiles bright. No one looking at them would ever guess they'd once been dying. Then Ivy appeared, and Kairo forgot how to breathe. She walked toward him in a simple white dress, her eyes locked on his, and he saw his entire future in her face. The vows were traditional until they weren't. "You saved my daughters," Ivy said, her voice breaking. "But more than that, you taught me to hope again. You showed me that broken things can heal, that love doesn't run out, it multiplies." Kairo's turn. He looked at Ivy, then at the twins, watching with wide eyes. "You three crawled into my life when I was convinced I was meant to be alone forever. You reminded me what it means to live, to love, to be whole." Tears slid down his face. "I was dead for 15 years. You brought me back." "We love you, Daddy," Zoe shouted, unable to contain herself. The crowd laughed. Kairo pulled both girls into the ceremony, and they became a family of 4 right there, vows and giggles mixing together. The adoption papers were signed that same afternoon, legal and permanent and real. 6 months after the wedding, their new home was complete. It wasn't a mansion. Kairo had learned that bigger wasn't better. It was a house built for living, with a yard for the twins to play in and a kitchen big enough for family dinners. Toys scattered across floors, laughter filled every room, and in the smallest bedroom, a nursery waited. Ivy was 5 months pregnant with their son. She stood in the doorway of the nursery, one hand on her growing belly, while Kairo painted the walls a soft blue. The twins helped by getting more paint on themselves than the walls. Family portraits covered the hallway, professional ones and crooked ones the girls had drawn. And in Kairo's study, Elena's photograph still held a place of honor, but now it was surrounded by new pictures. Ivy laughing, the twins covered in cake at their 4th birthday, Silas teaching Zoe to ride a bike. Peace between past and present. Silas came for Sunday dinners now, a regular fixture in their lives. He was Uncle Silas to the girls, the man who'd saved their lives and earned his redemption, one family meal at a time. Sinclair Biotech was thriving. The Elena Sinclair Memorial Fund had expanded the treatment program to 43 children across 6 states. Lives saved, families whole. One evening, as the sun set through their living room windows, Ivy rested against Kairo's chest on the couch. The baby kicked, strong and healthy. Zoe and Amara played with building blocks on the carpet, arguing cheerfully about whose tower was taller. Zoe suddenly jumped up and ran to Kairo, clutching a piece of paper. "Look, Daddy, I draw us." The picture was messy and perfect. stick figures holding hands. Kairo tall, Ivy with her round belly, two little girls, and Uncle Silas off to the side. Above them, a sun and the words, "Our family," in crooked letters. "You're not sad anymore, Mr. Grumpy Bear," Zoe said seriously. Kairo pulled Ivy closer, kissed her head, and looked at his daughters, with tears in his eyes and joy in his heart. "No, sweetheart, I'm not sad anymore. I'm home." Ivy's hand covered his, both of them holding the drawing. Their family, whole and healed. The end. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and drop a like. Now, let me ask you something that matters. Have you ever been given a second chance at happiness when you thought all hope was lost? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.